from the original opera. And just to give you guys an idea of some current reflections on the same kind of mentality, I'll play you Busta Rhymes' new track. Entitled I'll Hurt You.
Now every time I come and I hate you niggas, you should be gone, you get retarded and the niggas think I'm a killer. Oh, how the fuck I do what I do and say what I think and spit when I speak, you ain't never even got a question.
Right? So, I'm sure Hitler would have been very angry. So the whole situation here is we're looking at 21st century, different notions of what Mikhail Bakhtin would call the dialogic imagination. And the ideal here is to think about what another theorist of language would call heteroglossia, many languages. So when I'm talking about, from the beginning of Style Wars on up to these later collage films, is the idea of film grammar and the idea that collage has now migrated out of these kinds of norms of the gallery system, Marcel Duchamp and all this stuff, into the full form of, I think, urban youth culture. So from 1914, 1915 with D.W. Griffiths, we go to Luigi Russolo and the Art of Noise. We update that to Public Enemy. We think about stuff like De La Soul. All of that is a social reflection of changing times. Music is a mirror we held up to this culture and said, this is about continuous transformation. And I think in terms of a philosophy issue, you have to remember, there's always been a very specifically Eurocentric undercurrent to so much of what's been going on with the discourse of postmodernism. Baudrillard's idea of hypermodernism, hyperrealism. If you think about that and the idea of simulation, you can easily just look at how the presence of video clips represents the artist now at this point, and how people relate to even looking at a Bush remix. Is that a certain kind of realism? But these are undercurrents of tension, and again, of cultures in conflict. And it's not to say that Baudrillard is not applicable, or for that matter, Jacques Derrida's concept of archive fever isn't applicable to the same notion of database aesthetics. It's to say that digital media has absorbed almost all of the kind of things that they were describing and democratized them. So I'm going to wrap with that and play one last piece. And this is from my new album. It's called Drums of Death. It's with Public Enemy and Slayer. And basically what I ended up doing for this project was the drummer from Slayer, Dave Lombardo, is considered to be one of the best drummers in heavy metal. And it's funny, Rick Rubin was producing Slayer, Public Enemy, and the Beastie Boys all at the same time. And Slayer was the first rock band on Def Jam, which is a huge label. So early Public Enemy, if you listen, they always have these guitars and stuff. And the funny thing is that was all samples from Slayer. So for this project, I wanted to, I was talking to Chuck about it, I was like, let's take it back to more like 1988, 89 hip-hop. So a little bit, I guess that's old school now. So he sent me his rhymes. And again, I'm going to put this in the context of, again, structure. And this is something we were talking about in my class again, so excuse me if there's a little bit of overlap. But the vocal pieces that you're going to hear are essentially thinking about how much each culture is thinking about putting meaning in sequence. And this is what I was playing the Bush remix earlier, is again, editing as art form, sequencing. All right, so hold on 1 second.
Well, I'm all in, put it up on the board, another rapper shot down from the mouth that roared. 1, 2, 3, down for the count, the result of my lyrics, oh yes, no doubt. Cold rock rap 49 supreme is what I choose and I use. I never lose to a team, cause I can go solo like a Tyson Bolo. Make the fly girls wanna have my photo.
Right. So, what I then did was call up Dave Lombardo from Slayer. And I said, all right, Chuck's in his vocals, I'll send you what we call a tempo map. Can you play your drums into these elements files and then send me the clips back as high resolution AFF clips. AFF is a certain high resolution file that a lot of musicians use. Depending on what kind of software everybody's into, I use usually Sonar, Pro Tools, Digital Performer, Sound Designer, and a lot of the other stuff I use is like Max MSP that lets you, say for example, create effects and apply them to visual and video material. So to make a long story short, the software geeks, anybody out there who's into that, there's all on my website. There's a little button that says frequently asked question. You can hit that. And I know people, my friends out there who are into software, I know it's terrible that I'm using iTunes, but it's easy. you know what? I'll play you a different version. That's not the one that's on the album. So, for the lecture, I'm sure everybody will say, well, Spooky was playing heavy metal. Alright, so, let's see, I'll play a different version. Hold on 1 second. Alright, so it's eventually what that, that vocal piece became this, which is Public Enemy #1. Sense of, again, theater of the rhyme as distributed through a network to, let me just show you 1 or 2 other clips and then we're going to wrap and open up to questions. Again, the studio as the social network hub. Thinking about how these different forms of networks and exchanges occur implies, again, an implication inherited from certain aspects of, again, literary and cultural theory. So, the culture of the network. Now, this is me DJing outside of Tokyo. It's about 7,000 people at the show. Thinking about this in terms of contemporary art implies social sculpture. Now, again, thinking on the riff, the repetition, hopefully I'm going to pound this home. You guys all know that there's a loop going on here when I'm speaking about things, is that high and low culture, all of those issues have now been put under critique by urban youth culture and its interface with digital media. And I want people at the school to kind of think about that in the context of philosophy because we're looking at different languages. Now, why would a whole bunch of Japanese kids like my music if it's in English and they speak Japanese? The idea here is that it's not necessarily about New York or Tokyo or Berlin or Sao Paulo, but how, at this point, the networks that are holding these things together are based on both digital culture's relationship to the internet, where people are downloading files and sharing them, and also to the basic sociological fact that we're looking at a standardization of certain kinds of industrial and post-industrial culture. So the new tribes, so to speak, the information tribes, all of this is a pun about the same thing, like I was beginning my talk with those trains. The new network, the overground and underground, is global. So I'm going to wrap with that and open up to questions. Thanks.